Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be with all of you. And not just the folks who are here with us right now, live and in person, but I know that we will have a lovely audience of folks who are not able to be with us live, synchronous, but asynchronously afterward. Um, this is going to be a time together talking about something that is near and dear to my heart. I absolutely adore talking about negotiation. Weird topic to relish speaking about, but mostly because, as Zoe and I were speaking about just a few minutes ago, this is something we don't actually get to speak about in spaces that we have the opportunity to enjoy. We often talk about negotiation really kind of secretly, quietly behind the scenes. And very often we feel a sense of shame around this conversation, something that we shouldn't be talking about. We need to keep it on the down low. We need to really speak about it privately. And what we're going to do here is really an opportunity to be in conversation around larger issues that you are invited to carry from this space outward to your teachers, to your colleagues, to the folks you're going to be having dinner with. So this is really an invitation to dialogue so that you can take this conversation about negotiation, locate it in your values, and carry it out into community. You're here after a long day. You are really welcome to just sit back, listen. The slide deck and the recording will be yours if you are a person who takes notes. Awesome. But really don't feel that you have to. So you're going to receive both the slide deck and the recording and a couple of accompanying handouts. Just feel free to be here present as the kind of learner that you are, and in whatever way you feel like showing up here. I want to start by asking you a question. Do you know who this person is? And if you do, take yourself off mute and shout it out.
Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, nice, awesome. This is Wayne Douglas Gretzky. You may know him better by this picture. I'm very impressed, by the way. Usually in a group of all female identified folks, it takes like a few more seconds for someone to get that. Wayne Gretzky was a Canadian hockey player, professional hockey player, ice hockey, by the way. He was a head coach. He played 20 seasons in the NHL. His nickname was the Great One. He was considered to be the greatest hockey player ever. And even people like me, like you maybe, who really, I don't know, who don't know anything about hockey could recognize his picture. We might know a lot about his skill. He was kind of famous. He was very famous, and he was the leading scorer in NHL history, basically with more goals and assists than any other player. Pretty famous guy. He was pretty famous. He would talk about his work with the following sort of sets of skills and habits of mind. He talked about his instinct that was attributed to him in the following way. What was appeared to be instinct on the surface was really in large part due to his relentless practice. His relentless practice. He studied the game. He practiced the game. He was like an early advocate of watching video, like tape of his practice, and work with his coaches. He was not born knowing how to play. He learned how to do it and became an expert. So I wonder if you have heard this quote. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky. You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So I love this quotation. This is risk, right? If we don't take the risk, we can't receive the reward. And the risk might bear fruit, right? If we don't take the risk, we can't receive the reward. We won't know unless we try. This is hockey, right? But it isn't just hockey. If we don't try, We can't miss, but we also can't win. We can't receive the reward. What happens if we miss? Nothing happens if we miss, right? We simply try again. So you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. This quotation for me is the essence of negotiation. If we don't ask, we don't receive. All of us have heard no. All of us have heard no. If we miss, we don't get anything. And then we have the opportunity to try again. We're going to miss 100% of the shots we don't take. So I want you to hold Wayne Gretzky in mind as we move forward. You may not be a hockey fan. You probably aren't a hockey fan, but hold his wisdom in mind. I want to invite you, as we get started, to think about why you negotiate. You might be thinking about a specific process. You may be preparing to negotiate yourself, or you may be here thinking about faculty members, other folks that you're coaching to negotiate. Why do you negotiate? So I want to begin with allowing you to do some of the framing. And I want to invite you to think just for a moment about why you negotiate. Think about all the times you've negotiated, all of the processes you've negotiated over the course of perhaps a lifetime. And I want to invite you just to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, maybe where you're located, and one sentence. You negotiate because. I negotiate because. And reintroduce yourself in the chat with that line. Just share your name, maybe where you're located, and why you negotiate. Ooh, sorry. Once you've shared your contribution, feel free to scroll through what your colleagues are sharing. We've got some folks who are taking a look at their own ability to make a living, their own value, both for themselves and for the folks that they work with. I got a bum deal on a babysitting job when I was 16, really bad deal. Thinking about fair compensation for what each of you are bringing to your work. Thinking about your own work, right? That you yourself are worth it. Feel free to keep dropping in your own reasons for negotiation. Don't forget to scroll back, right? By the way, recognition. Being compensated fairly is also about recognition, being recognized for your value. Really important. Fair compensation. Feel free to keep adding, and don't forget to scroll back and forth. Learning how to advocate, right? Advocating for yourself, which is sometimes even harder than advocating for others. Self-advocacy is often harder than other advocacy. So locating our negotiation practice in our own rationale is really important. We're all here for a really specific reason. It's not just about money, but it is very, very much influenced by personal stories. We're going to think a little bit about that when we think about locating this work in our values and in shared values. But before we get there, I want to take a look at something very concrete. Here's some numbers, and I just want to throw them out to you and ask you if you might, just for a moment, imagine what they represent. Anybody want to take themselves off mute and guess what these numbers might represent? Or pop a response into the chat? Oh my God. Jen, please, if only salaries, I would love to know that you are making at the lowest
Not really
$555,350.
salary,
God,
meaning like athletes or something like that.
athlete
Yeah.
salaries.
Yeah.
Interesting. That should entirely possible. It is not the case that these are athlete salaries, but that would also be nice. Any other thoughts? You are close that they represent compensation.
It might be something about um, negotiating among males and females across the whatever companies were the group of people that were looked into.
So you're getting a little closer. I'm not gonna push you to like get it exactly. Thank you, Michaela. Awesome. So these are, as you see, these are dollar amounts, right? This is data from March 2023 from the National Women's Law Center. This is data that is improved from data that was collected from, roughly speaking, 2017 through, let's say, 2022 over the course of the pandemic. Data that, let's put it this way, improves over time, but was affected by the pandemic. But I will tell you exactly what it is. This is the lifetime wage gap. Top number for white women, middle number for Black women, and bottom number for Latino women. The lifetime wage gap. So let me tell you a little bit about what the wage gap is and why I want to share that information with you. So these numbers basically represent the total lifetime earnings that a woman loses over her lifetime compared to men due to the gender wage gap. This is over the course of a lifetime, not just in a year. So it's not just 1 year's salary, it's over the course of a lifetime. And if we don't close the wage gap, a woman who is starting her career today at either age 18 or, roughly speaking, at age 21 stands to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. And again, the top numbers for white women, the middle numbers for Black women, and the bottom numbers for Latino women. Hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of her career, undercutting her ability to provide for herself and her family, as well as for her retirement security. So I want to just tell you a really quick story to represent this so it actually makes sense. A 22-year-old white woman just starting a full-time job this year, stands to lose more than $500,000 over a 40-year career when compared to a male counterpart. So in other words, she's going to have to work for 50 years till almost age 70 to make what a man is going to earn in 40 years. He's going to get to retire at age 60. So when her male counterpart retires at age 60 after 40 years of work, this woman is going to have to work almost an additional 10 years until age 69 plus. And to close the lifetime wage gap, she's going to have to work past what is now, please God, the Social Security's full retirement age when you can start to earn benefits at age 62. For Black women, the lifetime wage gap here is $964,400, almost $1 million. And for Latino women, it's over $1.1 million. So for them, Black and Latino women would have to work well into their 80s and 90s, past Social Security's full retirement age, and actually beyond their life expectancy, right? To catch up to what white non-Hispanic men would have to make by age 60. So I share this with you simply to say, this is a lot of money that we are losing, and we are going to look past this number. It is not just an issue of cash, right? Cash is nice. Money buys things. Money is good. But I want to think about what this money does. This is money for you This is money for your staff. But what does this money do? And I want to think about what it does. Now, you are all now thinking about what this money would do for you. When I began to learn about the wage gap, I was really uncomfortable. And I'm not going to lie, I grew up in a lovely middle class Ashkenazi home. I went to a really nice public school. I went to a lovely college. My parents paid for college. I left college without any debt. I went to graduate school. I didn't have any debt. My education was paid thanks to my parents' generosity. I'm overeducated. I'm super privileged. And I looked at these numbers, and all I could think in my deep discomfort was, ooh, black shoes, purses, yay. I was really uncomfortable. I looked at these numbers, and all I could think was, oh, I'm really uncomfortable. I don't know what you feel when you look at these numbers. Cash is nice, money buys things. But I want you to look at these numbers, and I want you to think about what this represents to you. What $500,000, $1 million might represent to you, and what it might represent to your teachers. What closing the gender wage gap might actually do for your faculty. So I want to pause and invite you to ask yourself that question. Hold your responses and your reflections, because for many of you, this is actually a very, very difficult and very personal question. This is a staggering loss of money. It might represent the loss of an education. It might be a day school education or a college education or a graduate degree. It might be an education for your children, or might be for you. These numbers might represent the loss of equity in a home or a down payment or mortgage payment. For some of you or for your faculty, it might mean a safe place to live, to raise a family, or to provide shelter or care for a member of an extended family. This number actually might represent healthcare or insurance, long-term healthcare, the chance to keep yourself healthy, access to medicine, life-saving treatment, experimental treatment, elective surgery, or vital medical care. These numbers actually could represent being financially independent or financially stable. They could represent the ability to choose to get divorced, leave an abusive relationship, to not get married, to get married, to leave a spouse, to support a spouse, to pay for the wedding of your dreams, to pay for your child's wedding, a bar mitzvah, a simcha, or something else you might not be able to afford. For some people, this money might represent the ability to pay for fertility treatments. This might pay for the ability to afford to have a child, or to choose to not have a child, or to support a child with a disability. Bottom line, this is actually real money, right? Closing the gender wage gap is real money, and it represents security. It represents equity. So you're probably wondering why I'm spending all of this time on the lifetime wage gap. What this is about is the basic premise that when you do not negotiate, you lose money from the outset. When you have a 20-year-old teacher, and that teacher does not learn from the beginning how to negotiate, that teacher will lose $500,000 to over $1 million over the course of her lifetime. And this is what is lost. We have to begin with the premise that negotiation is allowed and is healthy. And I want you to know what we lose right from the start. It is not just what you lose, but it's what we all lose together. So this notion that we are losing something individually and we are losing something altogether is super important to hold. These values don't just affect us. This money, this loss does not just affect us. It affects us as teams, as faculties, as communities, as schools, and our responsibility for each other. This is something we do together, and a responsibility that we hold one to another. We have a ton of beliefs that we hold about negotiation. Most of them are totally not real. And I just want to remind ourselves that most of the stereotypes that we hold about negotiation are actually rooted in a set of cognitive and implicit biases. For example, men are better negotiators. Of course, we all believe that men are No, just kidding. We don't believe that men are better negotiators. We have to push back against that value. Um, Women aren't good at negotiation, right? No, this is a bias that we hold. Women face backlash when they negotiate due to a set of cognitive biases that we hold about women in negotiation. We also actually believe, due to these cognitive biases, that young women are bad at negotiation. And I could go on. This is really rooted in implicit bias. These are deeply ingrained stereotypes of women as passive, helpful, and accommodating. Great. Okay. It's not that men are better. Men just have more experience in negotiating because women don't negotiate. Women are not worse at negotiating. It's just that women aren't taught the skill, and then women aren't given the opportunity to actually practice the skill. Women in relationship actually really matter here. We have to do this in community. You are here together, learning how to do this, not individually coached, but as a part of a group of people. Typically, women negotiate alone, totally individually and isolated one from another. Men often have support from peers, colleagues, some kind of in-group support, maybe a mentor, a coach. What we are doing here now begins to change the dynamic by practicing in community, right? We want to talk to each other about salary. We want to talk to each other about negotiation. And this is not about how bad women might be at negotiation or advocacy, but about the systems around us that penalize us when we negotiate alone. And for the men who actually join us in that process, whether they are your colleagues in early childhood settings, or they are your colleagues in the boardroom, they are colleagues in early childhood settings in JCCs or in synagogues, we want to check our assumptions, check our biases as we move forward. We want to hold them and honor them and focus on some of the bigger issues about perception and about actual treatment, right? How women are treated when they negotiate and how men are treated, and when we ask for what we need, how we're treated by others and how we treat ourselves, and releasing ourselves from some of the biases that we hold. All of these apply for negotiations that range from like thorny contractual negotiations, salary negotiations, and frankly, negotiations over things like new cars, negotiations with our parents over end of life issues, and even negotiations with a toddler in the twos room over, when they are transitioning from diapers to underwear, right? Or a kid who will not eat green vegetables. So the invitation here is really to release our biases about negotiation and not holding on to the notion that folks are good at this. We are not, remember Wayne Gretzky, we are not born with the skill to negotiate. Everyone can learn to be good at this. We can change our belief. We can change how we come to the work, change our practice. If we are excellent at negotiating on behalf of others, negotiating, I don't know, a better car deal, car lease, we can actually learn how to do this together. There is never an instance when someone is better than we are. We actually can learn that skill. So I just want you to hold on to that. Really quickly for a moment, I want you to imagine that you know already what the definition of negotiation is. Pause for a minute in your head. What's the definition that you're holding for negotiation? The words that you are using. When you can, just shoot into the chat your definition for negotiation. And of course, I'm thinking here of like the cheesiest way to begin, like Merriam-Webster's definition of this is like the worst way to offer a wedding toast. So feel free to offer your favorite definition for negotiation. Love this. Okay, so we have a give and take to reach a solution both parties can live with. We have a back and forth process of coming to an agreement, another back and forth, right? Arguing for beliefs or values, including compromise, right? Discussion, where opposing parties state their interests and determine a path forward. There's process toward an agreement, working with an individual or organization. I like that, right? To ensure that everyone has a solution or agreement. So I'm noting that there are two or more, at least it's two or more parties, right? That there are at least two, if not more, folks or parties represented in the process. There is some kind of interaction between them, right? I like the back and forth, advocating, arguing for beliefs or values, some kind of back and forth. And there is some agreement, compromise, some kind of reaching toward something. So I want to share with you, Amy, sharing one's perspective in the hopes of influencing how another sees the situation. That to me feels like something I did with my kid when he was a teenager. I like that, influencing the situation. I want to share with you a definition for negotiation that is the one that I like to use, that incorporates a lot of what you all have represented, that I think brings an aspirational look at negotiation that may ruffle a little bit of feathers. And I want to invite us to look at it together. So take a look at what we have here. This is a combination of two definitions. I'll share with you a little bit about why it's a combination of two definitions. So here we have negotiation as a conversation, discussion, or dialogue between two or more individuals or parties that is intended to reach a beneficial outcome. In general, negotiation begins where a challenge exists over one or more issues and is an interactive process that engages compromise to resolve points of difference, mutual benefit, and mutual interest. In some instances, positions are offered and concessions are made in order to reach a final agreement. How does that sound? Make sense? So this is a little bit different than some of what you all offered, right? There are some things that are similar, some things that are a little bit different. I like here that this involves the language of conversation, right? That there's something interpersonal going on here. Some of you actually identified the interpersonal. This is somehow related, I think, to the idea of sharing perspective. There's a human nature that's referenced in this definition. The dialogue, the discussion, that it doesn't just have to be two opposing sides, right? This doesn't sound as hostile as it might ordinarily. I appreciate that it describes the interactive process. It doesn't quite sound as rooted in conflict as the definitions of negotiation that I grew up with. It's a challenge. It's not something nasty, just a challenge. What I also appreciate here is the language of mutual benefit and mutual interest. That the opposing sides are not in opposition, right? The language of opposing sides, even, it does not make sense. That there is mutual benefit and mutual interest, that perhaps the two parties, two or more parties, may be working under an assumption of shared values toward a shared goal, right? So for you, for example, if you are working on your contract with your supervisor, your mutual benefit and mutual interest are the community goals of serving your shared constituents. It's not a fight over money. It's not a fight over benefits. It's in service of the little kids who are growing up and receiving an education in your early childhood center. that mutual benefit and mutual interest is often something we put aside. We tend to not forget about the mutual benefit and mutual interest, and forget that there are values that inform that process. The last piece, in some instances, positions are offered and concessions are made in order to reach a final agreement, is a reminder that sometimes it takes a while, but also a recognition that sometimes actually negotiation can come to an agreement right from the beginning. That space of mutual benefit and mutual interest means that we actually could come to a resolution faster when we actually recognize mutual benefit and mutual interest. Some of us like to use agreement in place of beneficial outcome. The language of agreement sometimes feels a little complicated, but I want to just hold the notion that this is a creative solution that works for everyone. Something in negotiation requires that both parts work creatively together. This is bigger than one person. There's something that really requires us to adhere to a sense of mutuality. This isn't you negotiating alone. They're negotiating with you, right? You are often engaged in modeling for other people in this process. And this is about mutual responsibility, right? You are doing it perhaps for your bottom line, but a community is also doing it for their bottom line. I want to note that this is a definition that comes from two sources. Some of you may have read this at some point in the course of an education, Getting to Yes, written by 3 old white dudes, but also the Negotiator's Handbook, written in 2017, which is only one white dude and a woman, really reflecting a much more contemporary set of values around feminist negotiation, which is really fantastic. You're welcome to check it out of the library. It's a legal tome, really interesting. One of my favorite texts. So I want to just for a moment, Zoe and I had some fun with this before we really got started, to think for a minute about why we don't negotiate. I'm going to sort of zoom through this, but I want to think a little bit about the reasons we don't negotiate. As much as we may be here to think about our values, there are a number of things that really are set up as obstacles in our way that prevent us from negotiation. And I want to hold on to that, recognizing that, you know, we could all ask for money, right? Asking for money really isn't a big deal, but there's something that often gets in the way of negotiation, not just for us, but for the folks that we work with. There are lots of reasons we don't negotiate. You all listed some great reasons we do negotiate, but there are lots of reasons we don't. And I want to note really quickly that self-perception and assumptions and biases and stereotypes really do often get in the way of negotiation. Some of this is the way that we see ourselves, and some of this is the way that we actually see other people. And I want to invite you to release some of those here. So first, I want to think a little bit about the fact that sometimes we don't negotiate because we're worried they're not going to like us on the flip side, right? We actually are worried that it's going to reflect badly on us, right? Forgive my salty language, but sometimes we're worried they're going to think we're bitches, right? Everybody negotiates, and this is something we have to keep reminding ourselves. They might not like us, but everybody negotiates. Liking us is not the point. And additionally, whether this is about salary or pay or finances, we have to recognize that our employers have to pay for the value that we bring to our work. If we are worth something, then we are worth paying for. We all know that free is not worth it, and you get what you pay for. There's a great book called The Likability Trap by Alicia Menendez. She's a journalist. And she says likability is a moving target. And there's an invisible scorecard that we internalize, but we ask other people to fill out for us. So the idea of being liked is often really, really important for us. We just have to step into that and acknowledge what that does. It really is important for us to be liked, and the stakes are really high. How do we feel about not being liked? It's really hard. It's something I deal with every day. I really want to be liked. But the trade-offs are real. It's not just who sits next to us in like the school cafeteria, right? This should not stop us from negotiating. We have to let go of who likes us and ask for more money. And it's the same for our teachers. It's the same for our, the assistants, all of the folks in our settings. They might not like us, but it doesn't really matter. We have to take a risk that results in a reward. If they don't like us, it's okay to walk away. Next, I want to think about being greedy, what that looks like. That tends to fall in the same category. If they think we're greedy, that shouldn't stop us. Let them. It's okay to walk away. Are we afraid to lose opportunities, right? Is it an opportunity? Are they angry with us, right? We want to try to determine what the baggage is that we are bringing in. What is the baggage that we're bringing in? It's okay to compromise, to reconsider, or to shift our goals. It is extremely rare that they will be angry at us for asking for too much money and that we're going to get fired for asking for what we need, right? It is extremely expensive for an organization, a school, a JCC, a synagogue, to fire someone, to lose talent or prospective talent. Usually costs about 6 to 9 months salary to replace a full-time employee. Usually about 2/3 of a year of salary. It's very expensive to replace an employee. So let's acknowledge that you can have other offers, other financial cushions, other alternatives, and you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. But think about when you're negotiating. You never get one estimate, right? There's always somebody else you can find to do the job, sure. But when we ask for more money, it's okay. It is okay. Also, right, most of this is out of fear. What's the fear, right? What is the fear? Let us hold that fear and work past that fear. The entire idea that we might lose an opportunity, right? This is real. As women, we are socialized to feel grateful for opportunities. Yes, we are. We are spending all of our time socialized to feel grateful in a position of gratitude. That is lovely, but it puts them above you. We don't want to let them be above us. We want to shift the way we understand that and just be our respectful selves. We do not want to grovel. We get what we want, not by groveling. We don't also want to put ourselves in a position to think about this as losing an opportunity because our spouses provide us with what we need or our parents provide us with what we need. We actually don't want to leave money on the table, right? Because then that money either goes back to our employer or to someone else. We want to center the values that we were raised with, not center someone else's values. We also sometimes are afraid of being told no. That's real, by the way. That is absolutely real. But there is a profound difference between the experience of being told no when it's about money and the experience of being told no in other contexts. Most of that is about fear. Those of us who are adults and who experience no at work understand no. Those of us who work with small children are very well versed at being told no. Let us understand how we feel about no and translate that into our willingness to accept no when we hear about it in relationship to money. We won't be able to get to yes unless we ask. No, I'm not prepared is not valid for any of you because you're here. You are now better prepared, so you don't have to worry about being not prepared. And then there's the piece of underpricing yourselves. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a few minutes when we talk about how to actually prepare ourselves to do the work. That is really a big component of this. We want to make sure that we actually are prepared to really do a market analysis and ask all of the relevant questions that we have. I want to just end this piece by thinking about additional reasons that we might choose not to negotiate. We're tired, we feel cheated, we're exhausted, and we don't want to rock the boat. Whatever it is, I just want to remind us that human beings negotiate every single day. We negotiate at every age. We negotiate in public, in private, in our relationships, at school, at work, everywhere, in conflict, in peace. This is not about rocking the boat, right? Negotiation is a normal part of human behavior. You have to negotiate to get what you need. You have to negotiate to get what you need. You are lucky. That should not stop you from negotiating, and you are worth it. And it's time to actually ask for it. You are expected to negotiate. This is not like Machne Yehuda in Jerusalem, right? You are not negotiating for the price of tomatoes. You are actually expected to negotiate. You are expected to negotiate when they give you a number. You are expected to come back with another number. And often it is surprising for the folks that you are negotiating with when money is left on the table. And that goes the same for the folks that you are negotiating with when you offer money, contracts, salary negotiations to the folks that you are negotiating with as well. It might be easier for you if you offer a contract to a teacher and they just take it and sign it, sure. That's easier. But we as human beings are expected to negotiate. I want to just invite you to reflect really quickly on a couple of negotiation sort of beliefs, biases that are important to challenge. This notion that I mentioned before that women don't negotiate, of course we negotiate, obviously we do. Everybody negotiates, parents and children, folks in relationship, negotiators. This now has to apply to money. We have to actually be able to apply this to money. Yes, younger women negotiate less. Of course they do. Think about the assistant teachers in your programs. Of course they do. They have less experience. They are younger. Of course. Women are afraid of backlash. Of course they do. This goes back to the likability trap. Women are concerned with being likable as opposed to being strong. Remind ourselves, and this is what we can do for each other. We can be both. We can be likable and we can be strong. There is no actual data that shows that backlash has any effect on negotiation, not for white women, not for white women in senior positions, not for women of color. It doesn't actually affect anyone. We can be strong and likable. It doesn't have any long-term effect. Women must be assertive. This is an assumption. Actually, the best negotiators are not assertive, interestingly enough. The best negotiators are empaths. They are kind. They are caring. They are calm and compassionate and ethical and flexible. And the assumption that women need to be like men to do the work of negotiation is incorrect, right? We don't have to operate in a gender binary. We just have to be ourselves. Authenticity really wins the game. The research actually states that when women act like men in an assertive and bold kind of way, we actually lose, right? We want to really make sure that everybody who negotiates of every gender, everybody who negotiates needs to really display kind of competence and calm and humility and integrity. the kinds of things that when you show up at work, you're already doing really well. I want to really just quickly talk a little bit about the idea of the gender pay gap, which we mentioned before, and talk about something that I hope you will bring to your negotiations. This is the difference between the average male and female earning. It depends on a lot of factors: occupation, age, geography. In some instances, it's also sort of like family responsibilities. Really depends. The typical woman in America makes about $46,000 a year. The typical man makes about $56,000 a year. White women make about 80 cents on the dollar. Black women make only about 63 cents on the dollar. Latina women make about 55 cents on the dollar. This is relevant because so many of the folks who work in our early childhood spaces are not only white women. And we just want to draw attention to this because the needs are not just our needs, right? The needs are for people of all ages and stages and races, and also genders. And this is an issue both for people who are parents and not parents. There are folks who are caregivers and not caregivers. We want to recognize that the challenge here as well is a penalty for people who take time out of the labor force. People who take time out of the labor force are usually penalized around salary. For people who take 1 year of work, women's annual earnings are usually about 40% lower, which is really shocking. And men are often penalized for time out of the workforce, but they tend to make up their salaries a little bit faster. I also want to introduce you to a very important term that I hope you will use as frequently as possible. The wage gap often happens because naturally bias, of course. Folks are paid differently for different kinds of work. Women are paid less for the same work. People of different races are paid differently, less frequently for the same work. Frankly, the wage gap happens because low wage jobs often are paid less. Women are underrepresented in high wage jobs. But I want to raise the issue of pink collar work. Pink collar fields are typically devalued. The term pink collar dates back to 1967 from some research on the urban crisis, Jack Baumwell. This term was actually lifted up around women in clerical, administrative, and service-oriented positions. And the focus was on the gendered nature of the job. I'll get to which jobs they were, but also the economic characteristics around lower wage positions. Fine, great. No, actually not great. But it wasn't until 1977, a woman named Louise Cap Howe actually talked about pink collar work in the domain of women's work, specifically secretarial, clerical, and teaching and caregiving work. So pink collar work, specifically in the domain of traditionally domestic responsibilities linked to lower pay and limited career advancement opportunity. So this was in contrast to blue collar work or white collar work. And it was linked, interestingly enough, to social expectations and gender norms. So here, like, women were seen as caregivers, and the work that women did was seen as caregiving work. I am sharing this with you primarily to note that the work that you do is identified as pink collar work, and it is linked specifically to lower wages. Women in the domain of the broad space of teaching are seen as caregivers, right? We have to start to talk about this. It is okay to talk about it. And we have to talk about it with folks who are doing research, with prospective employers, with folks that you are coaching around negotiation, with people that you supervise. And it's okay to say things like, I'm concerned about the wage gap. Why? Here's the context about why I'm asking. Pink collar work is important and valuable work. However, it is typically lower paid work. Is there a way that we can raise our salaries? We have to change the dynamic. We have to work in the vein of really productive discomfort. This is never going to feel comfortable, but we have to move past the discomfort. We have to say, we value education. We value caregiving. Let's lift our salaries, right? We are concerned about the wage gap, but we care about children. So let's work to close these gaps. It's never going to feel comfortable, but aligned to our values, we actually want to make sure that we think about closing these gaps. I want to encourage you to talk about your work as pink collar work and explain why it is. This will help you to think about the value of it, to think about how to negotiate for more, and to amplify the fact that it is undervalued and needs to be valued differently. It might not get you a raise right away, but it will certainly draw attention to the values that underpin it. Really, I am so sorry. I'm running 2 minutes past where I wanted to go, but I want to give you lots of time to ask some questions. I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about salary, which I know is why you're here. Money is a way of shedding some taboos that we hold, that we likely bring from our families of origin, from society, from our relationships. We are not going to talk about each one of our individual sort of personal sets of needs around salary, but I want to invite you to think about the way that you navigate each process in your negotiations and in the negotiations that you're supporting for your teachers, for your teams, et cetera. We're going to talk about money, right? You have to think about how you define money in your context and how you're going to negotiate and think about your relationship with money. So first of all, you have to think about a target salary. This is about being real when you think about money. It can't be like, I want to make $100,000 a year. That sounds really good. You actually have to think about how much your monthly budget is. Like, how much money do you spend on your cable bill? Or how much money does gas cost? Or will it cost this month? What is it going to take to make your life work? Or how much is it going to cost to make your teachers' lives work? This is about geography. This is about the title that you have. And then bottom line, this is about the walkaway point, the bottom line that it's going to take to make it work for you in your organization. You have to do a market analysis to think a little bit about what the market will bear in your community. You have to research the title and how that affects salary. We know that that is sometimes hard in the Jewish community, especially if you have a funky title and what is called a Franken title, where a bunch of different roles are all sewn together. You have to think about all of the little pieces that you need to research and analyze to put together, and to really think about all of the different sort of granular pieces that you need to conduct an analysis. You're going to bring in your questions. What do you need to know? What's the data that you need? What are all of the tiny little pieces that you have to uncover, and where and from whom are you going to get that information? And then, of course, you're going to be wondering about a whole different set of information that's going to really be about harnessing your curiosity. What's absolutely necessary? This is evidence-based research, right? Size, location, your skills, calculated not based on where you live, but where you're working, right? You may live way out in the burbs, might be a little cheaper. You might want information about hiring and advancement, who's responsible for initiating the process, all of this, and then compare and contrast to other folks in your community, which will help you to understand exactly how to toggle that in relationship to potential increases. I want to really quickly mention your rights. You have some. Let's make sure that you actually use them. Salary and pay transparency, real. You need to know what the salary range is for any future role. You do not have to give them a number. They should be giving you a number. And if you want, you can actually ask them what the budget is for a particular position. You can treat this process like you're a detective, right? You should ask around. And don't let an employer ask you what your previous salary is. Don't, right? Make them share that information. There is a notion that employers should be talking to employees about full compensation. For your teachers, that might be a transit check or health insurance. For you, that might be professional development, vacation time, paying for your cell phone, nursery school tuition for your kids, etc. It's good to be really specific and really mostly here, this is about normalizing conversation about money and really to think about writ large, making sure that you are super, super comfortable engaging in the research that has to be done to do all of this, whether it is legal or simply based on the curiosity that you bring to the conversation. Last thing I want to do is to invite you to think about some helpful language. When you do this, what you are doing is modeling for yourself and modeling for other people. As educators, you already well know how to do this, but to really think about the curiosity and the inquiry that you bring to this process. What you do in modeling this is really to invite yourself into the work with a sense of excitement, but without the fear. I feel very strongly that when you have a set of language, you can dive in without anxiety. So you're going to get a copy of this in a worksheet, but I really feel very strongly that when we have language to bring, we can do the hard work of negotiation without the fear and without the worry that we might bring into this work that comes from the baggage that we all bring to the table. With that, we have moments before I know that you all have to step out into your real lives. I want to invite any general questions that you hold and really to encourage you to think about, broadly speaking, curiosities that might be coming forth for you as you're encountering any of these big ideas. Feel free to take yourself off mute or pop an idea into the chat and we can explore it together. And I'm happy to stay for another 10 minutes or so.
Do you have any conversational tips of how to change the conversation when you realize you're negotiating with somebody who actually isn't as interested in the mutual benefit and is more interested in winning?
It's a great question. I love the notion of mutual benefit, right? The idea that we are in this together is when I learned that, right? That was a game changer for me. And I wonder, especially if you are in the middle of a process, how you might want to think about this together. So if you are already in a process? Is that what you're thinking of?
I have been in processes, actually not salary negotiations, but negotiations about the way perhaps the institution will run.
Mhm.
Where I realize that I'm considering all angles, and I'm
Mhm.
with a person who is really about wanting to leave the meeting feeling like they got their way, or the were the so that I'm often at a loss there, because I feel like, well, maybe I should have just come in with one view and never given an inch. But of course, I want to hear all sides. So it's just,
And you are absolutely right that this is not just a skill that is helpful for contractual and salary negotiations. This is actually something that's super useful for any kind of negotiation around anything. My recommendation to you is really to say it, right? We are really in this to work toward X goal together. For example, I think about some of the work that I do is around policy. And those are very thorny issues often. My perspective is this, your perspective is that, but together we're hoping to accomplish this thing. Let's work on this together and see if we can come to some mutual understandings. That is, that takes a tremendous leap of faith. I often wonder if reminding folks of the constituents that we serve together to keep those folks in mind is a helpful way to orient ourselves. Um, Reminding ourselves that we serve, I hate to put it this way, but like we're doing it for the kids, right? Or we're doing it for the parents. We're doing it for these people or those people is a helpful orientation as well. Refocusing toward that goal, toward those people, reminding ourselves of perhaps organizational mission and vision is often a helpful way to think about that. Yeah. Thank you for focusing us on that, and also the reminder that that is really not exclusively about negotiating for more money, right? That's something that's useful in a wide variety of settings.
Thank you for this, Sarah. I have a question that you probably can't answer, but maybe just sort of a frustration that I'm putting out there in the universe. So I think because we are in a pink collar profession, the data doesn't help us, right? So like the comparative of what the other early childhood directors, how much underpaid they are, doesn't help me negotiate how I want to be better paid, or I want my teachers to be better paid, when the field in general is so grossly underbenefited and underpaid. And I think that that has been a frustration, I know, for us as an organization, and also for us individually in our own worlds, that we actually are very eager to share our salaries with one another and our benefit packages so that we can each use them to our advantage, but they all suck.
So Lisa, I feel like I have to say this. I went to look at some of the data before, and I just decided like I was not even going to touch the data because it was so horrifying to look at. And I'll be totally honest with you. My instinct is to say that the place where you want to start benchmarking data is not in the early childhood field, but the next closest place within that pink collar domain where you can rise, right? Is the next place to benchmark public school teachers. By the way, like that's not actually probably so helpful, but where is the place where you can rise as the next data point? I don't know what that answer is, but what I know is that I'm with you, right? I was appalled by the data. What is the next most valuable data point that will enable you to do like a gap analysis? I don't know. And by the way, it occurs to me that in different cities, that actually may be different. It could be, for example, public school teachers, it could be private school teachers, it could be home health care workers, it could be, folks in nursing. I don't know what that is, but I think it's worth experimenting with that data in different communities and gathering that data. One of the challenges is that we think we have to find some of that information on our own, when actually it's in many instances publicly available and we just have to like figure it out. And I'm happy to talk to you about where some of that is publicly available. Compensation studies are really important. We don't do enough of that. We need to start doing more of that. Yeah, that's not a super helpful answer, but we have to start comparing using other sets of data. Happy to take another question or two. Can't solve all the problems at once, but happy to try.